The state championships are 1 week away, and we have count them, six East Texas teams still alive in the playoffs. Welcome to the ETSN podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined as always by Chandler Vessels. You having fun yet, Chandler?
Oh, yeah, man. I wouldn't have imagined that there would be 6 teams left at this point heading into it, but it's been a great opening year of Texas football for me, and I'm excited for these games and excited to get going as we get closer to the state championship.
Well, like I said at the top, it's a busy week for East Texas. We have 6 state semifinal games to discuss, and we'll begin chronologically with a trio of Thursday games, beginning with the Class 4A Division II state semifinal between undefeated Pleasant Grove and undefeated Graham. That kicks off at 7 p.m. from the Ford Center in Frisco, and we've got 2 contrasting styles here. We got Pleasant Grove's methodical power run game. They run out of the wing tee, and we've got up-tempo spread attack from Graham. They like to chunk the ball all over the yard. The Steers average 54 points per game, and they're defeating teams by an average of 34 points. They are led by their senior quarterback, Tucker Horn, who has thrown for more than 4,000 yards and 53 touchdowns this season. But Graham also gets some production on the ground. They have a junior running back named Chase Gilmore, who is just 58 yards shy of 2,000 for the season, and he's rushed for 30 touchdowns. So a lot of weapons that Graham's coming at Pleasant Grove with on offense tomorrow. Pleasant Grove, on the other hand, they do most of their damage on the ground, like we said. They have 3 backs, T.J. Cole, Chauncey Martin, and Bruce Garrett, who all have at least 850 yards rushing this season. PG averages more than 8 yards a carry, so it's not as if they're always methodical and they're taking their time off the clock. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes they'll bust it for 50, 60 yards at a time. And they're coming off a thoroughly dominating performance last week against Melissa. Melissa team, I thought, had a chance to make it close, because they had come back and beaten Gilmer rather impressively in the second half last week. Just weren't able to carry that momentum into the quarterfinal round against Pleasant Grove. They scored 6 touchdowns on their first 6 possessions and led 41-7 at halftime. So any drama was gone long before halftime started. I think the key matchup in this one is going to be Pleasant Grove's rushing attack against Graham's defensive front. The Hawks average well over 40 points per game, but I don't think their offense necessarily is built to win shootouts. They have a quarterback named Ben Harmon, the sophomore, who's played very well in his first year at quarterback. He doesn't throw the ball a lot, but when he does, good things usually happen. I think he has 25 touchdown passes and I don't even think he's up to 100 completions yet this season. So about a third or a fourth of his completions have gone for touchdowns, but that's not how they win games. They win games on the ground. And then they get the defense cheating a little bit, and they're able to beat teams over the top with their passing game. But the rushing game is going to be key. They're going to have to keep Graham's offense off the field. This is probably the best offense that Pleasant Grove's defense has seen all season. We mentioned all the weapons they have on offense, led by their quarterback and running back. They have a couple of dynamic receivers as well. For Pleasant Grove, in order to win this game, they're going to have to extend possessions as long as they can and keep Graham on the sidelines for as long as they can. Graham counters with a rush defense has been pretty good, especially the last couple of weeks in the playoffs. They've held each of their last 2 playoff opponents, Sweetwater and Bushland, to less than 100 yards rushing each. So Pleasant Grove may have their work cut out for them, running the football. I think this has the potential to be a very, very competitive game, going all the way into the fourth quarter. I do think Pleasant Grove has an edge because they can run the ball when they need to, and when they need to pick up 2 or 3 yards on third and fourth and short, they can do that. And their defense is obviously playing really well. It has been all season long. And I expect, while Graham is probably going to get their points, they're going to get their big plays. I think Pleasant Grove can make enough stops to keep them in the game and with a chance to win it in the fourth quarter. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be there Thursday night in Frisco. I'm kind of going to be a resident of Collin County for the next 3 days because Pleasant Grove plays at Frisco, obviously tomorrow, and then Carthage plays there Friday night. And then just a short drive away in Allen, Longview plays their semifinal game on Saturday. So more on that game, more on those 2 games in a minute. But another Thursday game we got on the schedule is down in 2A Division I. It's the semifinal between San Augustine and Refugio at 7 o'clock at Cy-Fair's FCU Stadium in Cypress. Chandler, you will be there tomorrow night. You've done some research on this one. What are you looking forward to when San Augustine and Refugio meet up?
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing these two teams battle. Obviously, San Augustine is 14-0, looking for the first undefeated season since 1970. Coach Marty Murr is getting a few more games to coach his son Gavin at quarterback. That's a great story, but they're going to run into an even better story in what this Refugio team has overcome this season. That was one of the towns devastated by Hurricane Harvey. I know some players on that team lost their homes. And really, that whole town was just sort of devastated and has sort of rallied around this team. But it's more than that because one of their defensive backs, Casey Henderson, has earlier this season broke 2 vertebrae in his neck.
And I think it was the second game back, because their first game was canceled because of the hurricane. So it was the second game they were able to play. Like you said, broke a couple of vertebrae in his neck.
Yeah, it was bad. His brother was on the field. Sylvester is on the team to see it. I believe they were one of the families that lost their home too. So the team's really just sort of rallied around them this season. They're 12-1, and they definitely have a lot to play for in this game with a trip to the state championship on the line. They're the defending state champions, I believe. So they're obviously going to want to defend their title too. But they're going to run into a San Augustine team that's been rolling, really. KJ Davis has been outstanding all season, but believe it or not, he's kicked it up a notch in these playoffs.
Yeah, taking it to a completely different level in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. He broke a school record just 2 games ago, which, by the way, he previously held the school record. He's averaging 208 yards per game in the postseason, these 4 games, and 13.1 yards per carry. So I think that the goal for Refugio, if they're going to want to come out on top and defend their title and keep this sort of magical season going for them, they're going to want to obviously slow him down, sort of force San Augustine into a little bit more passing than they're comfortable with, which is not to say that Gavin Murr is not capable of passing. He's obviously very capable. Look at his numbers this season. He's passed for over 2,000 yards, 26 touchdowns compared to just 3 interceptions. That's a great touchdown-to-interception ratio. He makes good decisions with the ball. He was sort of immobilized a little bit with an injury a couple weeks ago, but looking at the box score from last week, it looks like he was able to run a few times, so it looks like that injury is getting a little bit better. I think this is going to be a really close game, and 2 really great stories from both of these teams this season, and I just can't wait to see which team is able to pull this one out.
And then the last of 3 Thursday games in East Texas is the Class 2A Division II state semifinal between top-ranked and 14-0 Tenaha against Burton at 13-1. That takes place at 7 o'clock from Crockett's Monty Jack Driscoll Stadium. Tenaha has been rolling all season long. I saw them in person last week, 59-0 against Timpson in a rematch from district. You did the preview for this game. I know you're looking forward to see how this one plays out. What were you able to find out about Burton?
Burton is 13-1. I've lost the first game of their season, but after that they've been rolling pretty much. They're a team that is winning each game by an average of 30.9 points per game. So there hasn't been much question as to who's going to come out on top in most of their games, but I think that's going to change in this one because Tenaha has as you said, been rolling in these playoffs. You saw them just destroy Timpson 59-0 last week. Tenaha, to me, is one of the more well-rounded offenses that we have in East Texas because they've got Ontario Thompson, who's a 2,000-yard rusher, but they've got also C.J. Horn, who's over 2,500 yards passing, 12-1 touchdown-interception ratio.
Another coach's kid.
Yeah, another coach's son, and he's got a great target to throw to in Trey Gardner, who's over 1,000 yards on the season, who's accounted for about 40% of Horn's yards, and I believe the next leading receiver on that team has barely scratched half of that. So I feel like the key for Burton is just maybe sort of take Trey Gardner out of the game if they can find a way to do that.
He's kind of the home run threat for Tenaha. I think you're right. I think if Burton can somehow limit his effectiveness, and he affects the game in many different ways. I mean, I saw him have a 40-yard touchdown run last week, and he's also a threat in the red zone. Sometimes they motion him in and they do those shovel passes. It's hard to kind of keep track of him because they always put him in motion, and he's a big-time deep threat. I mean, if you want to take a deep shot, he can run by most corners and safeties at this level. And then he returns punts and kicks. So he's always going to be around the ball. And, that's a huge weapon. If, like you said, if Burton can take away him and take away his effectiveness, I think they have more of a chance than they would otherwise in this game.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously what makes Tenaha so good is their ability to go to multiple different guys. They have so many weapons on this offense, but I feel like if they can take one of those away and maybe sort of make it a more one-dimensional game for Tenaha, then it's going to be a lot closer of a game. And by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Burton's running back's performance last week. DeMondrick Winters had a total of 8 touchdowns, I believe 6 on the ground and
That's
2 through the air.
That's getting it done.
Yeah, they scored 69 points last week, so Tenaha's defense is going to have its work cut out for it this week. But I'm excited to see who will win this one.
And then, oddly enough, just 2 Friday games. That's unusual to have more Thursday games than Friday games in this area. But we'll start with a monster game Friday night at the Ford Center in Frisco at 7:30. Carthage 14-0, Waco La Vega 14-0. This is a matchup of the last 2 4A Division I state champions. La Vega defeated Carthage in the 2015 semifinals and then went on to win the championship game. And then Carthage knocked off La Vega's district rival, China Spring, in last year's semifinals in just an incredible triple overtime game. Who knows? We might see something similar this week. I could dig another triple overtime game. I don't know if folks in Carthage would appreciate something like that. I'm sure they're grown accustomed to the 20 and 30 point blowouts that they've been getting this playoffs. But first things first, let's talk about La Vega. Defense is the name of the game for the Pirates. They're allowing less than 10 points per game. Only 2 teams have scored more than 2 touchdowns on La Vega this season. And they've held opponents to single digits in 8 of their 14 games this season. That's impressive. And the offense is talented as well. They've got 3 1,000-yard rushers on the roster, and that does not include their dual-threat quarterback, Jamal Williams, who has about 500 yards on the ground. So La Vega is very potent, as their 14-0 record would suggest. I think they ended the season ranked number 5 in the state in Class 4A, and obviously Carthage was number 1. For Carthage, the Bulldogs don't have too many weaknesses. You and I both know that. We've seen them a couple of times this season. They can run it with arguably the best running back in the state in Keontae Ingram, who's inching closer to 2,000 yards for the second consecutive year. I think he is 43 yards shy of that coming into this week. And then they might have the deepest receiving core in the state at the 4A level. You look at D. Bowens, DeWaylon Ingram, and Makai Colbert. Those 3 have combined for 40 touchdown receptions this season, so a lot of different weapons for quarterback Gunnar Capps to get the ball to. And then defensively, they're strong up front, especially at linebacker. When you look at Michael Gates, Ahmad Brown, and Jose DeJulian, and their secondary is loaded as well. You got Colbert and Ja'Cory Ware, who have combined for 14 interceptions this season. So not any weaknesses, at least that I can tell. Of course, I don't watch film like these coaches do, but not a whole lot of weaknesses for Carthage that I can see, and it's going to be a challenge, obviously, for La Vega, and then whoever would play Carthage next week if they won. So the key matchup in this one is going to be Carthage's running game against La Vega's defensive front. While it's usually kind of a pick-your-poison deal with defending Carthage because they're so diverse and so balanced, La Vega has the size and athleticism, I think, on defense to give the Bulldogs problems, especially if they're able to contain Ingram on the ground. If the Pirates can kind of turn Carthage into a pass-first operation, La Vega has the playmakers in the secondary to kind of affect the outcome of the game. They come in with 22 interceptions as a team, so that's kind of what they've been doing all year long. They've been shutting down the opponent's run game, forcing teams to pass when they really don't want to, and getting takeaways as a result. So that's something to watch out for if you're Carthage. I think they're going to have to establish the running game early. And really kind of test out that La Vega defensive front by going at them very early, the first couple of series of the game, just to kind of get a gauge of what they're working against Friday night. But should be a great crowd. Carthage will travel well. La Vega will bring some folks as well. It should be a loud, great environment inside the Ford Center. It's a domed environment. I can't wait for that. And then the other Friday game is Newton against Bowling, 7:30 at Texan Drive Stadium in Porter. Chandler, you'll be covering that. You're going to be spending some time in the Houston area this week. Newton and Bowling, you've seen Newton several times this playoffs, and they're going to be going up against a pretty dynamic weapon for Bowling. Tell me about the superstar running back for Bowling.
Well, I wasn't really able to dig up too many stats on Bowling. I couldn't find that much, but apparently they have a very good running back, as you said.
Yeah, Vernon Jackson, big guy, he's committed to Alabama. I think he's 6'4", 250. For those of you who remember ARP last year, ran into Bowling in the semifinals the week after they defeated Newton, and I think they just ran out of gas. They couldn't handle the repeated pounding that Vernon Jackson was delivering them. He's something else at this level, especially. You don't see too many athletes as big as he is that touch the ball as often as he does. And that's going to be a big challenge for Newton. But Newton's defense has been up to the challenge all season long. You've seen them up close and personal. What makes Newton so great on defense?
Well, they've got two just massive guys on the defensive line, and J.J. McGraw, and then sophomore James Sylvester, who's, I believe, like 6'5", 230 already.
He's got like a 20-foot wingspan or something like that.
Yeah, it's insane. But to see this guy in person, just how big he is. But they've combined for, I think, like 15 sacks and close to 20 tackles for loss. They're always the guys first in the backfield back there. And they've got Corbin Foster, a linebacker, who's really good too. And I've watched them a few times this season. Waskom is one of the best teams running the ball we saw in East Texas all season, and they just contained them so well last week.
Brick wall almost.
Yeah, Waskom wasn't able to do anything. It seemed like each drive was just another 3 and out for them. And Newton has allowed only 6 points per game this postseason. So they've really been just dominating people. You know, it's not just their defense. They've got lots of great players on the offense. Darwin Barlow's been a guy who's really come along for them this postseason. They always talk about he just turned 16. He's got so much ahead of him. He's only a junior, and he's leading East Texas in rushing touchdowns.
You know, he's
right
got
now.
kind of a baby face, but if you look beyond that, and if you look at his arms and legs, guy's put together.
Yeah.
For somebody who just turned 16 years old. So don't let the innocent look on his face fool you. He's a killer.
Yeah. So that matchup between Bowling's running game and Newton's defense is obviously going to take center, like the key matchup in this one. But I really expect Newton to go ahead and win this game and get on to state. They've been talking about going to state since the first round of the playoffs. They've exuded confidence all year long, and W.T. Johnson, their coach, has said, sometimes that's a bad thing, sometimes that's a good thing, but so far it's really been a good thing to have this confidence for Newton, and it hasn't slowed them down at all. So I expect them to pull this out.
I think it's instead of making them overconfident, it's made them more focused.
Yeah.
Because I think he's right. It could work one or two ways, and you could kind of slack off, saying, "Oh, we're good enough to get there. We don't have to do this extra stuff. We don't have to prepare as well as other teams because we're so good." But I think it's made them more focused. They understand that they have a great mindset. They have that killer instinct. They don't only just want to get to state. They want to beat up every opponent that they play, and they kind of want to, for lack of a better word, they don't want to embarrass them, but they want to make everyone aware just how much better they are than their opponent. So, and it takes a certain kind of instinct and certain kind of feel to play that way, and it's a confidence, but I think it's rooted in their preparation and how focused and how locked in they are. So I wouldn't expect anything less than what we've seen all season out of Newton. I think they're playing at a supreme level right now, and even against a tremendous athlete like Vernon Jackson, Bowling's going to have to come with a little bit something more than that, I think, to handle Newton, because we've seen Newton go up against dynamic players all season long and kind of shut them down. So that's it for Thursday and Friday, and we got one last game to talk about. Saturday's game, Longview against Waco Midway in the 6A Division II state semifinals, 6 o'clock from Eagle Stadium in Allen. Boy, the road keeps getting tougher for Longview. It's hard to imagine a more grueling scenario than having to face Klein Collins and Lufkin in back-to-back weeks. But what's Lufkin's reward for getting through those 2 weeks? They have to go up against maybe the most talented team in all of Class 6A in the state. The Midway Panthers, they have 6 Division I commits on their roster, including 5 on offense, 3 on the offensive line alone. But it all begins with their dual-threat quarterback, Tanner Mordecai. He is committed to Oklahoma, and for the season, he's put up just crazy numbers. He's got almost 3,800 passing yards with 47 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards rushing and 21 more touchdowns. And then they have a running back that's almost to 1,700 yards and 19 touchdowns on the year, James Fulbright. So they're loaded on offense. There's really nothing more you can say about that. They're just really, really good. Just listen to some of the teams they've beaten this season. They beat Cedar Park, Round Rock, Cedar Ridge, and Temple, all in non-district. They breezed through their district. And in the playoffs, Mansfield and South Lake Carroll, two proud programs, and really didn't have much trouble with any of those teams. So Longview's going to have their hands full. But there aren't many people, including ourselves, that expected Longview to still be around at this point in the playoffs. They've been proving people wrong all playoffs long, and it wouldn't surprise me if they continue to do it this week. Obviously, this one would be the shocker of them all. But what they've accomplished this season, I mean, think about it. They lost their starting running back in week 2, Jesse Anderson. They were blown out in their district opener by Mesquite Horn, and they had not reached the semifinals since 2010, yet here they are. And don't look now, starting running back Jesse Anderson is back. His first action since the injury. He got, I think, 7 carries for 55 yards and kind of gave them a spark in the second half against Lufkin with some big runs in the third and fourth quarter. And I expect him to get a little bit more involved this week. I don't know how. You and I were talking about this before. I don't know how he's playing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got just a massive club.
I don't know how he doesn't fumble it.
Yeah, on his right hand. And he must just exclusively be carrying the rock with his left.
Yeah.
And but I will say this: that's got to be a pretty nasty stiff arm he can throw out at somebody, because I have no idea how much that weighs, but it probably doesn't feel too good lodged in the face mask of a defender. So, but where would Longview be without quarterback Haynes King, the sophomore? He's 10-0 as the starter since taking over. And he's kind of put the team on his back the last 2 weeks. 4 touchdown passes against Klein Collins in that win, an upset. And then last week, just ice water in his veins. They get a long kickoff return after they just fallen behind to Lufkin with less than 2 minutes to go. And what does he do with less than a minute? Fires a pass into the back of the end zone. Camden Perry comes down with it, just a tremendous catch. I don't know. You can see the highlights right now on our website, but if you haven't seen those yet, it's worth your time.
It was a great catch.
Great catch. And you were able to interview Camden after the game. Just a great scene, by the way, at SFA on last Saturday. You and I were both there. But Haynes King, he's getting it done. And if you can add a guy like Jesse Anderson to that, and add more of a running threat to Longview, who knows? Who knows how much better they can be on offense? And they've been pretty good. The key matchup in this one is going to be Longview's running game, I think, against Midway's defensive front. As good as Longview's defense has played this season, despite its lack of size, I don't think Midway is going to have too much trouble running the football or moving the football. They just have too much talent up front, and like I said, they've got 3 college players on their defensive or on their offensive line, and no one has really come up with a formula to stop them yet. So I don't expect that to change. So for Longview to keep the dream alive, they're going to need their running game to come to life, and the good news is it kind of did that in the second half against Lufkin. They were okay running the football in the first half last week, but it really came alive last week in the second half. I think they put up about 150, 160 yards in the second half alone, and Anderson was a big part of that. And if he's able to contribute more than he did last week, that obviously bodes well for Longview. And like I said, if their running game can come around and start producing the way it has historically, and with the emerging star at quarterback like Haynes King, watch out. I mean, Longview, they may not win this week, but they're set up for the future because Anderson's only a junior, Haynes King is a sophomore, Camden Perry's a junior. I mean, there's a lot of underclassmen, a lot of good things to look forward to if you're in Longview. So those are the 6 semifinal games. Before we get out of here, we want to give a special shout-out to our offensive and defensive players of the week, and it was a clean sweep. St. Augustine took home both awards on offense. It was their running back, KJ Davis, 16 carries, 180 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the Wolves' 50-14 win over Centerville. In 4 playoff games, Davis, 895 yards and 13 touchdowns. That's not too shabby. And then on defense, his teammate.
Yeah, Chris Wade, the defensive back, had 2 interceptions, but not only that, he returned both of them for touchdowns, one of 81 and one of 58 yards. So I believe if you combine those 2 guys, they definitely came up with over half the points for St. Augustine. I think that's like 36 points between them.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns, 50 points. Yeah, I mean, without them, who knows what happens.
Yeah, so congrats to both those guys. They definitely deserved it this week.
No doubt. Don't forget to download the ETSN app right now. It's available in Google Play or the App Store. It's the best way to keep track of everything going on in East Texas in the sports world. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, good or bad, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Clint Buckley. He's at Chandler Vessels. And of course, you can contact us on the main Twitter account. That's at ETSN.fm. One more week until the high school football season reaches its climax at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, and we'll be back next week to preview it all. Everyone have a great weekend.